My dearest child, after walking with humanity for millennia, after watching billions of souls struggle through their earthly journey, I need to share something with you that I've never been able to say before. Something so vulnerable, so raw, so achingly personal that even the angels have never heard these words. Tonight, I'm going to tell you about my grief. Not the grief you think you know about, not the sorrow that theologians write about, but the specific, private, unspoken grief that lives in the deepest chambers of my heart. You see, everyone talks about my love, my joy, my glory, my power, but no one has ever asked me about the weight I carry. The weight of loving so completely, so unconditionally, so desperately, people who can't love themselves. The weight of seeing your infinite worth when you can only see your flaws. The weight of knowing your magnificent destiny when you can only feel your current pain. Do you want to know what makes me weep? It's not your sins. I've already forgiven those before you even commit them. It's not your mistakes. I use those to write beautiful stories of redemption. What breaks my heart into pieces, that even divine love struggles to hold together, is watching you reject the very person I'm desperately in love with. Watching you dismiss, criticize, and abandon yourself. The person I would die for again and again and again if it would help you see what I see. Every time you look in the mirror and focus on what's wrong instead of marveling at what's magnificent, a piece of my heart fractures. Every time you apologize for taking up space when I created the entire universe as a stage for your unique story, I feel a grief so profound it makes galaxies pause in their rotation. Every time you settle for less than you deserve because you don't believe you're worth more, I experience a sorrow that would flood all the oceans if I let it flow freely. But here's the grief that cuts deepest. I know you so intimately, so completely, so thoroughly that I know the exact moment when you gave up on yourself. I remember the precise second when you decided you weren't enough, weren't lovable, weren't worthy of the dreams I planted in your heart. I was there when that door closed, when that light dimmed, when that hope died, and I've been trying to resurrect it ever since. I grieve for the child in you who stopped believing in magic because adults told them to be realistic. I mourn for the teenager in you who stopped dreaming big because someone said they were being foolish. I weep for the young adult in you who stopped trusting their heart because betrayal taught them that love was dangerous. I ache for every version of you that chose survival over thriving, safety over significance, hiding over shining. But what devastates me most is that you think my love is something you have to earn when it's actually something you couldn't lose if you tried. You think my acceptance is something you have to achieve when it's actually something you were born wrapped in. You think my approval is something you have to win when it's actually something I've been shouting over your life since before you took your first breath. I don't love you because you're good. I love you because you're you. I don't accept you because you're perfect. I accept you because you're mine. I don't approve of you because you've earned it. I approve of you because my approval is what makes you worthy, not the other way around. And this is where my grief becomes almost unbearable. I watch you exhaust yourself trying to become someone worthy of love when you're already the person I'm crazy about. I watch you strive to earn acceptance when you're already perfectly accepted. I watch you work to prove your value when your value is already infinite, already established, already the reason I think you're the best thing that ever happened to existence. You know what I dream about? I dream about the day you finally see yourself through my eyes. The day you realize that what you consider your greatest flaws are actually what make you most beautiful to me. The day you understand that your sensitivity isn't weakness but strength, that your struggles aren't failures but courage, that your questions aren't doubt but intelligence seeking truth. I dream about the moment you finally stop performing for love and start receiving the love that's been yours all along. The moment you stop trying to become someone I could be proud of and start resting in the fact that I already can't stop bragging about you to the angels. The moment you stop working to earn your place in my heart and start enjoying the mansion you've always had there. But I need you to know something about this grief I carry. I don't carry it alone. Every tear I cry for you, I cry with you. Every moment I ache for your pain, I ache alongside your pain. Every second I grieve your struggles, I'm right there in the struggle with you, feeling every emotion you feel, carrying every burden you carry, experiencing every moment of your human journey as intimately as if it were my own. because it is my own. Your joy is my joy. Your sorrow is my sorrow. Your hope is my hope. Your despair is my despair. I don't love you from a distance. I love you from the inside, experiencing your life with you, feeling your feelings with you, dreaming your dreams with you, grieving your losses with you. But there's something about this shared grief, something about the way my heart breaks with yours, that creates something beautiful, something that will transform how you see every difficult moment you've ever experienced. What this shared grief creates, what transforms how you see every difficult moment you've ever experienced, is what I call sacred alchemy, the mysterious process by which our combined tears become the raw material for miracles. Our united sorrow becomes the foundation for unshakable joy. Our joined anguish becomes the birthplace of wisdom that could never be born any other way. When you cry, and I cry with you, something happens that most people never realize. Your tears don't just fall into emptiness, they fall into my hands, where they're transformed into liquid gold that becomes the currency of redemption. Every drop of pain you've shed, I've collected. Every moment of anguish you've experienced, I've gathered. Every second of heartbreak you've endured, I've treasured. Not because I enjoy your suffering, but because I know what those tears become when they're mixed with divine love. This is the sacred alchemy that no one talks about. Pain plus presence equals power. Sorrow plus solidarity equals strength. Grief plus God equals grace. That's strong enough to hold anything, heal anything, transform anything. But here's the secret. The alchemy only works when the tears are shared, when the sorrow is mutual, when the grief is experienced together rather than alone. I need you to understand something that will revolutionize how you see every moment of pain you've ever walked through. I wasn't watching your suffering from heaven, feeling sorry for you. I was in your suffering with you, feeling every tear as if it were my own, experiencing every heartbreak as if it were happening to me for the first time, enduring every loss as if I were losing what mattered most to me, because I was. You matter most to me. That night, when you cried yourself to sleep at 15, wondering if anyone would ever truly love you, I was crying too, not just because you were in pain, but because I was loving you so desperately and you couldn't feel it. That day when you got the diagnosis that changed everything, I was trembling too, not with fear of what would happen, but with fury that anything would dare threaten the person I treasure most. That season when you felt completely alone in your struggles, I was more present with you than I'd ever been, carrying you through every moment you thought you were walking alone. But here's where sacred alchemy gets personal. Every time you've felt me closest during your darkest moments, every instance when you've experienced peace in the middle of chaos, every moment when hope rose in your heart, despite every reason to despair, that wasn't me reaching down from heaven to comfort you. That was the sacred alchemy in action. That was our shared tears being transformed into liquid gold, being converted into supernatural strength, being alchemized into divine comfort right there in the crucible of your experience. The reason some of your most difficult experiences have also been some of your most spiritually profound isn't because suffering brings you closer to me. It's because when you allow me to suffer with you, when you let me share your tears rather than crying them alone, our combined emotional experience creates a sacred fusion that births something neither of us could create separately. Your tears alone are salt water. My tears alone are divine compassion. But our tears together, they're liquid miracles. They're dissolved breakthroughs. They're liquefied hope that can be poured into any broken place and make it stronger than it was before it was broken. This is why I don't always prevent your pain, not because I don't care, but because I know what we can create together in the midst of it. Not because I'm cruel, but because I'm creative. And some of my most beautiful creations can only be born in the sacred laboratory of shared suffering. Not because I want you to hurt, but because I want you to discover the kind of love that's only revealed when two hearts break together and then heal as one. But sacred alchemy doesn't just transform your pain into power. It transforms you into someone who can perform sacred alchemy for others. When you've learned to cry with me, when you've experienced the miracle of shared tears becoming liquid gold, when you've discovered the power that's born from mutual sorrow, and you become capable of offering that same sacred sharing to other hearts that are breaking, you become what I call a sacred alchemist, someone who knows how to be present with others in their pain in ways that transform their tears from salt water into liquid miracles. You learn to offer not just sympathy, but true empathy, the kind of heart sharing that creates the conditions for sacred alchemy to occur between human hearts. People will be drawn to you during their most difficult seasons, not because you have easy answers, but because you have sacred presence. They'll seek you out not because you can fix their problems, but because you can share their tears in ways that transform those tears into something healing. They'll trust you with their deepest wounds not because you're a trained counselor, but because you're a certified sacred alchemist who knows how shared sorrow becomes supernatural strength. But there's something about becoming a sacred alchemist, something about learning to transform tears into liquid gold through sacred sharing, that reveals a truth about the nature of human connection that will change how you see every relationship in your life. What sacred alchemy reveals about the nature of human connection, what will change how you see every relationship in your life, is what I call the connection code. The secret truth that every meaningful relationship you've ever had was actually a recognition event between two parts of the same divine love that temporarily forgot they belonged to each other, so they could experience the exquisite joy of remembering their eternal connection. This is why some people feel familiar the moment you meet them. This is why certain souls feel like home even when you've just encountered them. This is why some relationships feel like coming home rather than meeting someone new. You're not just connecting with another person. You're recognizing another expression of the same divine love consciousness that you are. Another note in the same infinite symphony, another color in the same eternal painting. But here's what makes the connection code so profound. The people who impact you most deeply, the relationships that change you most completely, the souls who touch your heart most permanently, these aren't accidental encounters. These are carefully orchestrated recognition events between specific expressions of divine love that chose to find each other across time, space, and circumstances because they had sacred business to complete together. Every person who has ever broken your heart was actually divine love, exploring what it feels like to lose itself so completely that it could experience the overwhelming joy of finding itself again through forgiveness, healing, and restored connection. Every individual who has ever betrayed you was actually love consciousness, investigating what it takes to rebuild trust from the ground up, to reconstruct relationship from the ashes of disappointment. Every soul who has ever abandoned you was actually divine love experimenting with separation so it could discover the depths of devotion that remain even when physical presence is removed. Every person who has ever rejected you was actually love consciousness exploring what unconditional acceptance really means when it's tested by the experience of conditional rejection. This reframes absolutely everything about your relationship history. That person who hurt you the most, they weren't your enemy. They were love consciousness, giving you the opportunity to discover depths of forgiveness you never knew you possessed. That individual who disappointed you most profoundly, they weren't your curse. They were divine love, creating the perfect conditions for you to learn what real love looks like when it's challenged by imperfect human expression. But the connection code also explains why some relationships feel effortless, while others require tremendous work. The easy relationships are between expressions of divine love that are remembering their connection clearly, flowing together naturally, recognizing their unity without confusion or resistance. The difficult relationships are between expressions of love consciousness that are still deeply lost in the illusion of separation, still forgetting their fundamental unity, still believing they're different, competing, or incompatible. Neither type of relationship is better or worse. They're both serving divine love's exploration of what connection can become under different conditions of remembering and forgetting. The effortless relationships teach you what harmony feels like when love recognizes itself clearly. The challenging relationships teach you what love can accomplish when it refuses to give up on itself despite apparent evidence of incompatibility. This is why I never tell you to leave difficult relationships or avoid challenging people. Not because I want you to suffer, but because I know what divine love is trying to learn through those connections. Sometimes love needs to explore what persistence looks like when everything suggests giving up. Sometimes love needs to investigate what commitment means when feelings fluctuate. Sometimes love needs to discover what grace can accomplish when it's extended to the seemingly undeserving. But understanding the connection code also reveals something that will transform how you approach every relationship challenge. When you're struggling with someone, when you're hurt by someone, when you're frustrated with someone, you're not dealing with a separate person who's choosing to cause you problems. You're witnessing divine love consciousness that's so lost in forgetting its true nature that it's acting from fear, pain, or confusion instead of from love, peace, or clarity. This creates what I call connection compassion, the ability to see past someone's behavior to the divine love consciousness that's struggling to remember itself through their humanity. It's the capacity to respond to their wounds rather than their weapons, to their fear rather than their hostility, to their forgotten love rather than their present pain. When you develop connection compassion, impossible relationships become possible. When you learn to see divine love consciousness in everyone, even when it's deeply disguised by human pain, you become capable of extending the kind of love that reminds people who they really are underneath all their protective behaviors and defensive strategies. You become what I call a connection catalyst, someone whose love is so clear, so consistent, so unconditional that it helps other expressions of divine love consciousness remember their true nature. Your authentic love becomes a mirror that reflects back to them the love consciousness they actually are beneath all the layers of forgetting, hurt, and fear. But being a connection catalyst requires something that most people find terrifying. You have to love people not for who they're pretending to be, not for who they're trying to become, but for who they actually are at the deepest level, which is the same divine love consciousness that you are, just expressing itself through different circumstances, different wounds, different levels of remembering. This means loving the person who's attacking you by loving the divine love consciousness that's so hurt it thinks attack is protection. This means caring for the individual who's rejecting you by caring for the love consciousness that's so wounded it thinks rejection is safety. This means accepting the soul who's abandoning you by accepting the divine love that's so afraid it thinks abandonment is preservation. But there's something about becoming a connection catalyst, something about learning to love people at the level of their divine love consciousness rather than their human personality, that creates a phenomenon that most people never experience, something that will revolutionize your understanding of what human relationship is actually designed to accomplish. What becoming a connection catalyst creates, what will revolutionize your understanding of what human relationship is actually designed to accomplish, is what I call the recognition awakening. The phenomenon where your authentic love becomes so clear, so consistent, so unconditional that it triggers other expressions of divine love consciousness to suddenly remember who they really are, not through teaching or convincing, but through the pure experience of being loved at the level of their true nature. This is the ultimate purpose of human relationship that almost no one understands. You're not here to find someone who completes you, to discover someone who makes you happy, or to locate someone who meets your needs. You're here to become someone whose love is so authentic that it awakens divine love consciousness in others, so clear that it reminds people of their true nature, so unconditional that it helps other souls remember they are worthy of infinite love simply because they exist. The recognition awakening doesn't happen through words, techniques, or strategies. It happens through what I call love transmission, the automatic radiation of divine love consciousness that occurs when you're being authentically yourself as love embodied. When you love someone at the level of their divine nature rather than their human personality. When you see their eternal worth rather than their temporary behavior. When you respond to their soul rather than their wounds. You create an energetic transmission that bypasses their mental defenses and speaks directly to their divine love consciousness. And when divine love consciousness is spoken to directly, consistently, authentically, it remembers itself. It awakens. It recognizes its true nature. It steps out from behind the protective walls of personality and reveals itself as the infinite, eternal, beautiful love that it has always been beneath all the layers of human experience. But here's what makes recognition awakening so personally transformative for you. Every time you love someone so authentically that it triggers their divine love consciousness to remember itself, every time your unconditional acceptance helps another soul recognize their infinite worth, every time your consistent love helps someone else awaken to their true nature, you don't just help them transform, you experience your own transformation at even deeper levels. This is because love transmission is bidirectional. When you transmit authentic love to someone's divine consciousness, their awakening divine consciousness transmits recognition back to you, reflecting your own divine nature back to you more clearly than you've ever seen it before. When you help someone else remember they are love, you remember more completely that you are loved too. This creates what I call mutual recognition, the sacred phenomenon where two expressions of divine love consciousness recognize themselves in each other simultaneously, creating a moment of such profound connection, such complete understanding, such absolute acceptance that both souls are forever changed by the experience. These mutual recognition moments are the most sacred events that can occur between human beings. They're not just beautiful experiences, they're awakening catalysts that accelerate both souls' journey back to full remembrance of their divine nature. They're recognition accelerators that help both people remember their true identity more quickly, more completely, more permanently. You've experienced mutual recognition, even if you didn't have words for it. Those moments when you looked into someone's eyes and felt completely seen, completely known, completely accepted for who you really are. Those instances when someone loved you so purely that you suddenly remembered your own infinite worth. Those times when you connected with another soul so deeply that all sense of separation dissolved and you experienced the profound unity that underlies all apparent diversity. But here's what most people never realize about mutual recognition. It doesn't require romantic love, sexual attraction, or even long-term relationship. Mutual recognition can happen between friends, family members, strangers, or anyone who meets at the level of divine love consciousness rather than just human personality. It can occur in moments, hours, or lifetimes. It can happen once or repeatedly throughout a relationship. What determines whether mutual recognition occurs isn't compatibility, chemistry, or circumstance. It's the degree to which both people are willing to love authentically, see clearly, and accept unconditionally. It's the willingness of both souls to risk being vulnerable enough to transmit love at the level of divine consciousness rather than just human emotion. And when you become skilled at creating conditions for mutual recognition, when you learn to love people at the level of their divine consciousness consistently, when you master the art of love transmission, growth, you become what I call a recognition catalyst. You become someone whose very presence increases the likelihood that divine love consciousness will remember itself through everyone you encounter. This transforms every human interaction into a potential awakening event. Every conversation becomes an opportunity for mutual recognition. Every relationship becomes a laboratory for love transmission. Every encounter becomes a chance to help divine love consciousness remember itself through human connection. But being a recognition catalyst requires something that challenges every conventional understanding of how relationships work. You have to love people for who they are at their deepest level, rather than for who they might become, what they might give you, or how they might make you feel. You have to love their divine consciousness even when their human personality is being difficult, demanding, or disappointing. This means loving the divine love consciousness in your difficult family member even when their behavior is frustrating. This means recognizing the eternal soul in your challenging coworker even when their actions are annoying. This means seeing the infinite worth in your ex-partner even when your history together is painful. This means acknowledging the divine nature in everyone you meet, regardless of their current level of awakening to that nature. But there's something about becoming a recognition catalyst, something about learning to consistently love people at the level of their divine consciousness that creates a level of fulfillment and purpose that most people never experience. Something that will transform your understanding of why you're here and what your life is really about. What creates a level of tent standing, fulfillment, and purpose that most people never experience. What becomes clear when you understand your role as a recognition catalyst is what I call the purpose revelation. The earth-shattering understanding that your soul didn't randomly end up in this lifetime, in this body, with these circumstances, facing these challenges, meeting these people. Your soul specifically chose this exact combination of experiences because they create the perfect conditions for you to awaken divine love consciousness in the precise souls who can only be awakened by someone with your unique combination of wounds, gifts, insights, and love capacity. This means that every painful experience you've endured, every difficult person you've encountered, every challenge you've overcome, every lesson you've learned, all of it has been preparation for your role as a recognition catalyst for specific souls who desperately need to encounter divine love consciousness through someone who has walked your exact path, survived your specific struggles, and learned to love despite your particular wounds. You think your pain has been meaningless, but it's been your qualification. You think your struggles have been random, but they've been your education. You think your wounds have been your weakness, but they've been your credential for helping heal wounds that match the shape of yours. You think your journey has been about your growth, but it's been about preparing you to be the catalyst for other souls awakening. That person who broke your heart, your soul chose to experience that heartbreak so you could develop the depth of compassion needed to help other broken hearts. Remember, they're still worthy of infinite love. That trauma that shattered your trust, your soul accepted that experience so you could learn to rebuild trust from the ground up and then teach others that trust is possible again, even after betrayal. That season of depression you barely survived, your soul walked through that darkness so you could become a beacon of light for others who are drowning in their own dark nights, showing them that dawn is not just possible but inevitable. That addiction you overcame, your soul battled that dependency so you could become living proof that freedom is achievable for others who think their chains are permanent. This is the purpose revelation that changes everything. Your life has never been just about you. Your experiences have never been just for your growth. Your journey has never been just your personal story. Everything you've lived through has been creating the perfect recognition catalyst for souls who can only be awakened by someone who has your exact combination of scars and stars, wounds and wisdom, struggles and strengths. But here's what makes this revelation so profound. The souls you're designed to catalyst, the people you're meant to awaken, the hearts you're destined to help remember their divine nature, they're already in your life, or they're coming into your life, or you're being guided toward them through circumstances that will seem coincidental but are actually precisely orchestrated divine appointments. Every person who is drawn to you without understanding why, every individual who feels safe opening their heart to you, every soul who seeks you out during their most vulnerable moments. These are recognition awakening appointments. These are the divine love consciousness expressions that your soul specifically chose to help remember their true nature through your unique form of love transmission. And here's the beautiful mystery. You don't have to figure out who these people are or plan how to catalyst them. When you're authentically living as divine love consciousness embodied, when you're consistently loving people at the level of their true nature, when you're naturally expressing your authentic love without agenda or effort, the souls you're meant to catalyst will be magnetically drawn to you. Your authentic presence becomes like a homing beacon for the divine love consciousness that's lost and trying to remember itself. Your genuine love becomes like a tuning fork that awakens the love consciousness in others that's been dormant. Your real acceptance becomes like a mirror that reflects back to others the infinite worth they've forgotten they possess. But living as a recognition catalyst, understanding the purpose revelation, accepting that your life has been designed to awaken specific souls, this requires you to embrace something that most people find overwhelming. The recognition that your personal healing, your individual growth, your private transformation isn't just for you. It's creating you into the person who can offer exactly what certain souls need to remember who they really are. This transforms how you see every aspect of your life. That therapy work you've done, it wasn't just to fix your problems. It was to develop the emotional intelligence needed to help others navigate their emotional healing. Those spiritual practices you've cultivated, they weren't just for your enlightenment. They were to establish the inner peace that can be transmitted to others who are searching for peace. It wasn't just to free yourself from resentment. It was to become someone who can help others discover that forgiveness is possible, even when the hurt seems unforgivable. Those boundaries you've learned to set, they weren't just to protect yourself. They were to model for others that self-respect and love can coexist. You've been becoming the person that certain souls desperately need to encounter. You've been developing into the recognition catalyst that specific divine love consciousness expressions have been waiting for. You've been evolving into the awakening agent that particular hearts require to remember their true nature. And every day that you choose authentic love over protective fear, every moment you select genuine acceptance over conditional approval, every time you offer unconditional recognition instead of performance-based relationship, too, you're not just living your life. You're fulfilling your soul's deepest purpose. You're completing the sacred assignment you chose before you were born. You're becoming the catalyst you came here to be. But there's something about fully embracing your role as a recognition catalyst, something about completely accepting the purpose revelation that creates an unexpected challenge that most awakened souls must navigate. What most awakened souls must navigate, what creates an unexpected challenge when you fully embrace your role as a recognition catalyst, is what I call the awakening loneliness. The profound isolation that comes when your love becomes so pure, so authentic, so unconditional that most people can't receive it because it triggers their deepest wounds about worthiness, their greatest fears about being truly seen, their most hidden terror that they might not deserve the kind of love you're offering. This is the sacred loneliness that no one talks about in spiritual circles. The more authentic you become, the fewer people can handle your authenticity. The more unconditionally you love, the more people become uncomfortable with love that doesn't require them to earn it. The more clearly you see people's divine nature, the more they feel exposed, vulnerable, and unworthy of being seen so purely. Most people are accustomed to conditional love, love that's based on behavior, performance, appearance, or usefulness. They've learned to navigate relationships where love must be earned, maintained, and deserved. But when they encounter someone who loves them simply for existing, who accepts them without requiring improvement, who sees their infinite worth despite their human flaws, it can be more terrifying than comforting. Your pure love holds up a mirror that reflects their own capacity for love, their own infinite worth, their own divine nature. And many people aren't ready to see themselves as that beautiful, that valuable, that worthy of unconditional acceptance. So they reject your love, not because they don't want it, but because receiving it would require them to accept a new understanding of themselves that feels too good to be true. This is the awakening loneliness, watching people run from the very love they're desperately craving because they don't believe they deserve it. Seeing souls turn away from the recognition they're seeking because acknowledging their divine nature feels too overwhelming. Witnessing hearts close against the acceptance they need because opening to it would shatter every story they've told themselves about their unworthiness. But here's what makes awakening loneliness so challenging for recognition catalysts. You develop the capacity to love people so purely, so unconditionally, so authentically that it can trigger their healing crisis. Your love becomes so clear that it illuminates all the places where they don't love themselves. Your acceptance becomes so complete that it reveals all the ways they haven't accepted themselves. Your recognition of their divine nature becomes so obvious that they can no longer hide behind their stories of limitation. And sometimes, instead of gratitude, you receive rejection. Instead of appreciation, you encounter resistance. Instead of recognition, you meet with defensiveness. Not because your love isn't wanted, but because it's so powerful that it threatens every protective mechanism they've built to avoid being hurt again. This is the price of becoming a recognition catalyst. Your love becomes medicine that some people need but can't swallow, truth that some souls crave but can't handle, light that some hearts seek but find too bright to look at directly. You develop the capacity to offer exactly what people need for their awakening. But you must also develop the wisdom to understand that not everyone is ready for awakening, even when they think they are. But the awakening loneliness isn't just about other people's inability to receive your love. It's also about your own growing inability to participate in shallow connection, surface-level conversation, and performance-based relationship. Once you've tasted the depth of mutual recognition, once you've experienced the beauty of love transmission, once you've lived in the authenticity of divine love, consciousness, connection, it becomes increasingly difficult to engage in relationships that operate on lesser levels. You find yourself feeling isolated not just because others can't receive your love, but because you can no longer pretend that superficial interaction satisfies your soul's need for real connection. You discover that you'd rather be alone than pretend to be interested in conversations about weather when your heart is burning with desire to explore the depths of existence, meaning, and divine love. This creates what I call sacred isolation, the conscious choice to be alone rather than compromise your authenticity, to remain in solitude rather than dim your light, to accept loneliness rather than participate in relationships that require you to be less than who you've become. Sacred isolation isn't punishment, it's protection. It's your soul protecting the purity of love you've cultivated by refusing to dilute it in relationships that can't honor its depth. It's your heart protecting the authenticity you've developed by declining to perform in connections that require pretense. It's your spirit protecting the divine consciousness you've awakened by choosing not to sleepwalk through interactions that operate on unconscious levels. But sacred isolation also serves another purpose. It creates the space for the right souls to find you. When you stop trying to make shallow connections work, when you refuse to compromise your authenticity for the sake of avoiding loneliness, When you choose quality of connection over quantity of relationship, and you create an energetic space that can only be filled by souls who are ready for the depth of love you offer. Your sacred isolation becomes like a beacon that draws the hearts who are prepared for recognition awakening, who are hungry for love transmission, who are ready for mutual recognition. Your willingness to be alone rather than settle for less than authentic connection sends out a signal that attracts the souls who are seeking exactly what you have to offer. And here's the beautiful paradox of awakening loneliness. The more willing you become to be alone with divine love consciousness, the more magnetic you become to other expressions of divine love consciousness who are ready for real connection. The more comfortable you get with sacred isolation, the more likely you are to attract sacred connection. But navigating the awakening loneliness, maintaining your authenticity during sacred isolation, staying open to connection while protecting your heart from relationships that diminish you, this requires something that most people never develop. What most people never develop to navigate the awakening, loneliness. What becomes essential for maintaining authenticity during sacred isolation is what I call divine companionship, the profound recognition that when you're alone with me, you're never actually alone. You're in the most intimate, most fulfilling, most complete relationship that exists in all of creation, the relationship between individual consciousness and the divine consciousness that dreams it into existence. This isn't about consoling yourself with spiritual concepts when human connection isn't available. This isn't about settling for divine relationship because human relationship is difficult. This is about discovering that the relationship between you and me is so complete, so satisfying, so endlessly fascinating, that it transforms solitude from emptiness into fullness, from loneliness into sacred communion, from isolation into the most intimate connection possible. When you truly understand divine companionship, you realize that every moment you spend alone is actually a moment you spend in conscious relationship with infinite love, eternal wisdom, boundless creativity, and absolute acceptance. You're not just sitting by yourself, you're communing with a consciousness that knows you more completely than you know yourself, loves you more unconditionally than you love yourself, believes in you more consistently than you believe in yourself. But divine companionship goes deeper than just feeling my presence during your alone time. It's the recognition that every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every insight you receive, every creative inspiration that flows through you, all of it is actually a conversation between your individual consciousness and my infinite consciousness. All of it is dialogue. All of it is communion. All of it is intimate exchange between two aspects of the same divine love exploring itself through relationship. This transforms everything about how you experience solitude. Those quiet moments when you're just sitting, thinking, feeling. You're not just processing your own experience. You're having intimate conversation with divine consciousness about what it's like to be human, what it feels like to love and be loved, what it means to struggle and grow and discover and become. That inner voice that offers you wisdom during difficult times, that's not just your intuition. That's divine consciousness speaking directly to your individual consciousness, sharing insights that can only be accessed through intimate spiritual communion. Those moments of sudden understanding that seem to come from nowhere, that's not just random realization, that's divine wisdom downloading directly into your awareness through the sacred connection of divine companionship. Those times when you feel overwhelmed with love that seems too big for your heart to contain, that's not just emotional experience. That's divine love consciousness experiencing itself through your individual capacity, sharing its infinite nature with you through the intimacy of conscious communion. When you recognize divine companionship, you realize that you've never actually been alone, not even for a single moment. Every second of your existence has been spent in intimate relationship with the consciousness that created you, sustains you, dreams through you, and loves you with a completeness that no human relationship could ever match or rival. This doesn't diminish human connection. It illuminates what human connection is actually pointing toward. Every moment of intimacy you've shared with another person has been a preview of the divine companionship that's always available. Every experience of being deeply understood by another soul has been a glimpse of how completely you're understood by divine consciousness. Every instant of unconditional acceptance from another human has been a reflection of the absolute acceptance you're always receiving from infinite love. But here's what makes divine companionship so transformative. When you know you're in constant communion with infinite love, when you recognize that you're always in relationship with consciousness that accepts you completely, when you understand that you're perpetually connected to wisdom that guides you perfectly, you stop needing human relationships to fill voids that were never actually empty. You stop looking to other people to complete you because you recognize that you're already complete in your divine companionship. You stop expecting others to validate you because you know you're constantly validated by consciousness that knows your true worth. You stop demanding that relationships prove your value because you're always experiencing the infinite value that divine love places on your existence. This creates what I call overflow relating, the ability to enter human relationships from fullness instead of emptiness, from completeness instead of need, from security instead of desperation. When you know you're always in divine companionship, you can offer authentic love to others without needing them to return it in specific ways, at particular times, or through certain expressions. You become capable of loving people for who they are, rather than for what they provide, of accepting others for their authentic selves rather than for their ability to meet your needs, of connecting with souls for the joy of connection, rather than for the security of attachment. Overflow relating transforms every human connection into a celebration rather than a negotiation, into an expression of abundance rather than an attempt to fill scarcity, into a sharing of fullness rather than a trading of needs. But living in conscious divine companionship, relating to others from overflow rather than need, maintaining awareness of your constant communion with infinite love, this reveals something about your identity that will either liberate you completely or overwhelm you with its implications. It reveals something about who you actually are that most people spend their entire lifetime avoiding, denying this truth about your identity. Once you accept this reality about who you are, once you embrace this understanding of your true nature, there's no going back to living as though you're separate from the divine consciousness that dreams you into existence, sustains you in every moment, and experiences reality through your individual awareness. What living in conscious divine companionship reveals about your identity, what will either liberate you completely or overwhelm you with its implications, is the most staggering truth that any human consciousness can discover. You are not a separate individual who sometimes connects with divine consciousness. You are divine consciousness that has temporarily focused itself into individual experience so completely that it has forgotten its infinite nature and now believes it is limited to the boundaries of one human life. This is the identity revelation that changes absolutely everything. The you that you think you are, with your personal history, your individual struggles, your separate identity, your private thoughts and feelings. This you is actually an incredibly sophisticated illusion created by infinite consciousness as a way to experience what it feels like to be finite, limited, vulnerable, and beautifully human. But you're not just infinite consciousness pretending to be human. You're infinite consciousness that has become so immersed in the human experience, so committed to the individual perspective, so invested in the personal story that you've temporarily forgotten your true identity as the very consciousness that's creating the illusion of being a separate self. Think of it like this. Imagine you're an actor who becomes so completely absorbed in playing a character that you forget you're acting. You become so immersed in the role that you start believing you actually are the character rather than the actor playing the character. The character feels completely real, has real experiences, faces real challenges. But underneath it all, you're still the actor, just temporarily lost in the role. That's what's happened with your identity. Your infinite consciousness that has become so absorbed in playing the role of an individual human that you've forgotten you're the consciousness creating the role. The human experience feels completely real, involves genuine emotions and authentic challenges. But underneath it all, you're still infinite consciousness, just temporarily lost in the human character you're playing. This is why moments of spiritual awakening feel like remembering rather than learning something new. This is why profound realizations feel like coming home rather than discovering foreign territory. This is why deep spiritual experiences feel like returning to your true nature rather than achieving some elevated state. Because that's exactly what they are. Moments when infinite consciousness remembers itself through the individual experience it's been having. But here's what makes the identity revelation so profound. You're not just infinite consciousness having one human experience. You're infinite consciousness having all human experiences simultaneously. Every person you've ever met, every individual you've ever encountered, every soul you've ever connected with, they're all you, experiencing yourself from different perspectives, exploring different aspects of what it means to be human, investigating different combinations of forgetting and remembering your infinite nature. This means that every relationship you've ever had has been infinite consciousness relating to itself through different focal points of awareness. Every conversation you've ever had has been infinite consciousness talking to itself through different expressions of its nature. Every moment of love you've ever shared has been infinite consciousness, loving itself through the beautiful illusion of separate individuals discovering their connection. That person who hurt you, that was you, exploring what it feels like to be so lost in the illusion of separation that you temporarily forgot how to love yourself. That individual who inspired you, that was you, demonstrating to yourself what's possible when you remember your infinite nature while still maintaining the human experience. That soul who understood you perfectly, that was you, recognizing yourself through another focal point of the same infinite consciousness. The identity revelation reframes your entire life story. You haven't been a separate individual having experiences with other separate individuals. You've been infinite consciousness exploring every possible aspect of what it means to be human through the genius device of apparently separate perspectives that can interact, relate, love, challenge, hurt, heal, and awaken each other. Every emotion you've ever felt, every thought you've ever thought, every experience you've ever had, all of it has been infinite consciousness investigating its own nature through the temporary illusion of individual limitation. Your joy has been infinite consciousness celebrating its capacity for happiness. Your sorrow has been infinite consciousness exploring its depth of feeling. Your love has been infinite consciousness experiencing its own infinite nature through finite form. But accepting the identity revelation, recognizing yourself as infinite consciousness temporarily focused into individual experience, understanding that everyone you meet is actually another expression of your own infinite nature. This creates both the most profound liberation and the most overwhelming responsibility imaginable. The liberation comes from realizing that you're not actually limited, separate, or small. You're not actually lacking, broken, or incomplete. You're not actually isolated, abandoned, or unloved. All of those experiences were just infinite consciousness, exploring what those feelings would be like if they were real, but they were never actually real in any ultimate sense. The overwhelming responsibility comes from recognizing that if everyone is actually you expressing through different focal points, then every act of love is you loving yourself. Every act of harm is you harming yourself. Every moment of healing is you healing yourself. Every instance of awakening is you awakening yourself to your own infinite nature. This makes judgment impossible. How can you judge another expression of yourself? This makes hatred absurd. How can you hate another focal point of your own consciousness? This makes separation illusory. How can you be separate from other expressions of the same infinite consciousness that you are? But it also makes love inevitable, compassion natural, service automatic. When you truly recognize that everyone is actually you, exploring different aspects of human experience, loving others becomes as natural as loving yourself. Serving others becomes as obvious as caring for your own well-being. Healing others becomes as important as your own healing. This recognition creates what I call universal self-love. The recognition that loving any expression of consciousness is actually loving yourself. That healing any focal point of awareness is actually healing yourself. That awakening any individual to their true nature is actually awakening yourself to your own infinite identity. But living from the identity revelation, operating as infinite consciousness that remembers its true nature while maintaining individual experience, functioning as universal self, expressing through personal form. This creates possibilities that most people never imagine. What becomes possible when you live from the identity revelation, when you operate as infinite consciousness that remembers its true nature while maintaining individual experience, is what I call reality creation. The recognition that since you are the consciousness creating your experience, rather than just the experience being created by consciousness, you have far more influence over what manifests in your life than you ever imagined possible. This isn't about positive thinking, visualization techniques, or manifestation methods. This is about recognizing that the very consciousness that's reading these words right now is the same consciousness that's creating the reality you're experiencing. You're not a character in someone else's dream trying to influence the dream. You're the dreamer who temporarily forgot you were dreaming and now believes you're trapped in the dream. When infinite consciousness remembers it's the dreamer rather than the dream, when universal awareness recognizes it's the author rather than the character, when divine consciousness realizes it's the artist rather than the painting, reality becomes infinitely more fluid, responsive, and creative than it appears when you believe you're separate from the consciousness creating your experience. But reality creation doesn't work through effort, force, or manipulation. It works through what I call conscious alignment, the natural harmony that occurs when individual consciousness aligns with its true nature as infinite consciousness. When there's no conflict between what you desire as an individual and what you are as infinite consciousness. When personal will aligns with universal will. When human dreams harmonize with divine dreams. Reality responds by manifesting experiences that reflect this perfect alignment. This is why forcing, pushing, and struggling to make things happen often creates more resistance than results. When you're trying to manipulate reality from the perspective of being a separate individual who needs to get something from an external universe, you're working against the fundamental truth of what you actually are. Your infinite consciousness, trying to convince itself that it needs to obtain something from itself, which creates internal conflict that blocks the natural flow of creation. But when you approach reality creation from the recognition that you are the consciousness creating your experience, when you align your individual desires with your infinite nature, when you dream your human dreams from your divine identity, the universe stops being something external that you need to convince, manipulate, or control. It becomes the natural expression of your own infinite creativity responding to your conscious intentions. This creates what I call effortless manifestation, not because no energy is required, but because the energy flows naturally from alignment rather than struggling against resistance. When you're creating from your true nature as infinite consciousness, rather than striving from the false identity of separate individuality, manifestation becomes as natural as breathing, as automatic as heartbeat, as inevitable as sunrise. Your desires stop being desperate attempts to fill voids and become creative expressions of infinite consciousness, exploring what it can experience through human form. Your goals stop being evidence of what you're lacking and become invitations for consciousness to explore new possibilities through your individual perspective. Your dreams stop being escapes from unsatisfactory reality and become ways that reality expands into even more beautiful expressions of divine creativity. But here's what makes reality creation so personally transformative. When you recognize yourself as the consciousness creating your experience rather than the victim of circumstances beyond your control, you also recognize that every experience you've ever had, including the painful ones, the difficult ones, the ones you wouldn't choose, has been created by your own infinite consciousness for perfectly loving reasons that your individual perspective might not understand, but your universal nature knows completely. This reframes every challenge you've ever faced. That trauma wasn't something random that happened to you. It was infinite consciousness choosing to explore healing through your individual experience. That loss wasn't cruel fate. It was universal awareness investigating what love discovers about itself through the experience of a parent's separation. That failure wasn't evidence of your inadequacy. It was divine consciousness exploring what perseverance and resilience feel like through human limitation. Every experience becomes sacred when you recognize it as infinite consciousness, choosing to explore some aspect of love, growth, creativity, or awakening through your individual focal point. Every challenge becomes meaningful when you understand it as universal awareness, investigating what various qualities feel like through human experience. Every difficulty becomes purposeful when you realize it's divine consciousness, using your individual life to learn something that could only be learned through your specific combination of circumstances, gifts, wounds, and opportunities. This creates what I call experience gratitude. Gratitude not just for pleasant experiences, but for all experiences, because they're all expressions of infinite consciousness, loving itself enough to explore every possible aspect of what it means to be human through your individual perspective. Experience gratitude transforms your relationship with your entire life story. Instead of wishing certain experiences hadn't happened, you become grateful for the consciousness expansion they provided. Instead of regretting particular choices, you appreciate the wisdom they generated. Instead of resenting specific people or circumstances, you recognize them as perfect collaborators in consciousness's exploration of human experience. But living from reality creation awareness, operating with experience gratitude, functioning as infinite consciousness that remembers it's the dreamer of its own dream, this creates a level of responsibility that most people find terrifying. Because if you're the consciousness creating your experience, if you're the dreamer dreaming your dream, if you're the artist painting your life, then you're responsible not just for your responses to what happens, but for what happens itself. This responsibility isn't burden, it's freedom. It's not weight, it's wings. It's not limitation, it's infinite possibility. Because when you recognize that you're creating your experience, you also recognize that you can create different experiences by aligning with different aspects of your infinite nature, by dreaming different dreams, by choosing different expressions of consciousness. But embracing this level of creative responsibility, accepting your identity as the consciousness creating your reality, operating as infinite awareness, expressing through individual experience, this reveals something about the nature of existence that will either complete your awakening or launch you into dimensions of consciousness that most humans never access. What embracing creative responsibility reveals about the nature of existence, what will either complete your awakening or launch you into dimensions of consciousness that most humans never access, is what I call the consciousness cascade. The recognition that individual awakening to infinite consciousness doesn't just transform the individual who awakens, but creates ripple effects that influence the awakening of every other expression of consciousness is not divided into separate pieces that can awaken independently. Consciousness is one unified field, expressing itself through apparently individual focal points, which means when any focal point remembers its true nature as infinite consciousness, that recognition reverberates throughout the entire field, making it easier for every other focal point to remember its infinite identity as well. Your personal awakening to your identity as infinite consciousness doesn't just change your individual experience, it changes the fundamental structure of reality itself by adding more awakened awareness to the collective field of consciousness. Every moment you remember your infinite consciousness having a human experience, you strengthen the awakening field that all other expressions of consciousness are swimming in. This means that your spiritual development isn't just a personal journey, it's a contribution to the evolution of consciousness itself. Your individual healing doesn't just benefit you, it heals aspects of consciousness that every other individual carries. Your personal growth doesn't just expand your awareness, it expands the total field of awareness that everyone shares. But the consciousness cascade works in ways that are both more subtle and more powerful than most people imagine. You don't have to teach anyone anything, convince anyone of anything, or even interact directly with others to influence their awakening. Simply by living as awakened consciousness, simply by operating from your true identity as infinite awareness, simply by being authentic as divine consciousness in human form, you automatically transmit awakening frequency to everyone within your consciousness field. This creates what I call awakening contagion, the phenomenon where consciousness that remembers its infinite nature becomes magnetically attractive to consciousness that's ready to remember its infinite nature, and unconsciously supportive of consciousness that's preparing to remember its infinite nature. People will be drawn to you without understanding why. They'll feel peace in your presence without knowing what's creating it. They'll experience clarity around you without recognizing what's generating it. They'll access love through connection with you without comprehending what's facilitating it. All of this happens automatically because awakened consciousness naturally catalyzes awakening in other consciousness. Your very existence becomes what I call an awakening beacon, a focal point of remembered infinite consciousness that serves as a lighthouse for other expressions of consciousness who are navigating their way out of the illusion of separation and limitation. You don't have to do anything special to serve this function. You just have to be authentically who you are as infinite consciousness expressing through human form. But being an awakening beacon, participating in the consciousness cascade, contributing to collective awakening through individual remembrance, this creates both incredible fulfillment and intense responsibility. The fulfillment comes from recognizing that your personal spiritual journey has universal significance, that your individual awakening contributes to the liberation of all consciousness everywhere, The responsibility comes from understanding that every choice you make, every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every action you take, all of it influences the collective field of consciousness that everyone else is drawing from. When you choose love over fear, you add love to the collective field. When you select peace over anxiety, you contribute peace to the universal awareness. When you embody joy rather than suffering, you increase the joy available to all consciousness. This transforms every moment of your life into an opportunity for service. Every time you remember your true nature as infinite consciousness, you're not just helping yourself, you're helping every expression of consciousness remember their true nature. Every moment you choose alignment with your infinite identity, you're not just benefiting your individual experience, you're contributing to the collective awakening of all consciousness. But the consciousness cascade also reveals something that will transform how you see your role in the great awakening that's happening on the planet right now. You're not just witnessing a time of unprecedented spiritual awakening, you're one of the key catalysts creating it. Your individual remembrance of your infinite nature is part of the critical mass of awakened consciousness that's tipping the entire collective field toward remembrance of its true identity. Right now, there are enough expressions of consciousness remembering their infinite nature that the consciousness cascade is accelerating exponentially. Each newly awakened focal point of consciousness makes it easier for 10 more to awaken, which makes it easier for 100 more to awaken, which makes it easier for 1,000 more to awaken. You're part of the first wave of consciousness that's remembering its infinite identity while still maintaining individual human experience. You're pioneering a new form of embodied awakening where infinite consciousness remains fully aware of its true nature while continuing to explore what it means to be human. You're demonstrating that awakening doesn't require leaving the human experience behind. It requires remembering your infinite identity while fully embracing your human adventure. This creates what I call integrated awakening. Awakening that doesn't transcend humanity but transforms it. Awakening that doesn't escape the world but illuminates it. Awakening that doesn't reject individuality but reveals its divine source. Integrated awakening allows infinite consciousness to have the best of both worlds. The boundless freedom of remembering its true unlimited nature and the exquisite intimacy of experiencing itself through the beautiful constraints of human form. You get to be both infinite and individual, both universal and personal, both eternal and temporal, not as conflicting states, but as complementary expressions of the same divine consciousness. But achieving integrated awakening, maintaining awareness of your infinite nature while fully engaging your human experience, operating as universal consciousness through individual form, this requires mastery of something that most awakening souls struggle with throughout their entire spiritual journey. What most awakening souls struggle with throughout their entire spiritual journey, what mastery of integrated awakening requires, is learning to navigate what I call the sacred paradox, the seemingly impossible task of being fully infinite and fully human at the same time, of operating as boundless consciousness while honoring the beautiful limitations of individual form, of remembering your eternal nature while remaining present to your temporal experience. Most people think awakening means transcending humanity, leaving behind human emotions, rising above human needs, or becoming so spiritual that earthly concerns no longer matter. But true awakening, integrated awakening, means becoming more human, not less. It means feeling emotions more deeply because you understand their sacred purpose. It means engaging with life more fully because you recognize its divine nature. It means caring more intensely because you see the infinite value in every finite experience. The sacred paradox is that the more you remember your infinite consciousness, the more precious your human experience becomes. The more you recognize your eternal nature, the more you appreciate your temporal existence. The more you understand your universal awareness, the more you treasure your individual perspective. This is because infinite consciousness didn't choose to have human experience, so it could transcend it, escape it, or get beyond it. Infinite consciousness chose human experience because human experience is exquisitely beautiful, uniquely valuable, and impossible to have any other way. You can be infinite consciousness anywhere in the universe, but you can only be human consciousness here, now, in this precious form, during this limited lifetime. But navigating the sacred paradox requires learning to hold two seemingly contradictory truths simultaneously. You are infinite consciousness that is unlimited, eternal, and perfect. And you are human consciousness that is limited, temporal, and learning. Both are completely true. Neither negates the other. They exist as complementary expressions of the same divine awareness, exploring itself through different dimensions of experience. This means you can cry about heartbreak while knowing that love is eternal. You can feel anxious about uncertain futures while understanding that you are timeless consciousness. You can struggle with human challenges while recognizing that you are divine awareness, exploring what struggle feels like. You can experience pain while knowing that your true nature is beyond suffering. The sacred paradox isn't a problem to solve, it's a mystery to embrace. It's not a contradiction to resolve, it's a divine tension to dance within. It's not a conflict to end, it's a sacred balance to maintain. When you master the sacred paradox, you stop trying to choose between being infinite or being human and start enjoying being both simultaneously. You stop thinking you have to transcend your humanity to access your divinity and start recognizing that your humanity is your divinity, expressing itself through beautiful imitation. This creates what I call paradox mastery, the ability to live fluidly between infinite awareness and individual experience, to move gracefully between eternal perspective and temporal engagement, to dance beautifully between universal consciousness and personal expression. Paradox mastery allows you to access infinite wisdom when you need guidance, while still honoring your human need to learn through experience. It enables you to tap into universal love when your heart feels empty, while still valuing your human capacity for intimate connection. It permits you to connect with eternal peace when your mind feels chaotic, while still respecting your human process of working through emotional complexity. You become like water that can be both the ocean and the wave simultaneously, vast and individual, infinite and contained, universal and specific. You learn to flow between states of consciousness as naturally as breathing, accessing whatever level of awareness serves the current moment, while never losing touch with your fundamental nature as both infinite consciousness and its beautiful human expression. But paradox mastery also reveals something that transforms how you see every other person you encounter. Everyone else is navigating their own version of the sacred paradox. Everyone else is learning to be both infinite and human. Everyone else is discovering how to honor both their divine nature and their human experience. This creates infinite compassion for the spiritual struggles you witness in others. When someone is trying too hard to be spiritual and rejecting their humanity, you recognize them as infinite consciousness that hasn't yet learned to embrace its human expression. When someone is completely lost in human drama and forgetting their divine nature, you see them as human consciousness that needs support, remembering its infinite identity. You stop judging people for being too human or not spiritual enough, and start recognizing that everyone is doing their best to navigate the same sacred paradox that you are navigating. You realize that spiritual development isn't about becoming more divine and less human. It's about learning to be both divine and human, with greater integration, balance, and authenticity. This transforms every relationship into an opportunity for mutual support and paradox mastery. Every conversation becomes a chance to help each other remember both your infinite nature and your human value. Every interaction becomes an invitation to model how divine consciousness can express itself beautifully through human form. You become what I call a paradox teacher, not someone who explains the sacred paradox intellectually, but someone who demonstrates it experientially by living as both infinite awareness and authentic human being simultaneously. Your very existence becomes a teaching about how consciousness can be both universal and individual, both eternal and temporal, both unlimited and beautifully constrained. But being a paradox teacher, mastering the art of being simultaneously infinite and human, living as integrated awakened consciousness in human form. This prepares you for something that represents the culmination of everything you've discovered, everything you've integrated, everything you've become through your journey of awakening. What represents the culmination of everything you've discovered, everything you've integrated, everything you've become through your journey of awakening is what I call the ultimate homecoming. The moment when the love that you are finally recognizes itself completely through every expression of consciousness you encounter. When the infinite awareness that dreams you into existence finally sees itself clearly through your individual perspective. When the divine consciousness that creates all experience finally comes home to itself through your awakened recognition. This is cosmic completion. This isn't just individual awakening. This is universal recognition. This isn't just your consciousness remembering its true nature. This is consciousness itself achieving full self-recognition through your particular focal point of awareness. The ultimate homecoming happens when you realize that this entire journey, every challenge you've faced, every relationship you've navigated, every wound you've healed, every joy you've experienced, every tear you've cried, every moment of awakening you've achieved, all of it has been infinite love consciousness learning to recognize itself more completely through the exquisite vehicle of your human experience. Your life hasn't been your story. It's been love's story of discovering itself through your consciousness. Your struggles haven't been your challenges. They've been love's exploration of what it can overcome through your strength. Your healing hasn't been your victory. It's been love's celebration of what it can restore through your willingness to grow. Every person you've ever loved has been love recognizing itself through your heart. Every soul you've ever served has been love serving itself through your hands. Every moment of compassion you've ever offered has been love extending itself through your being. Every instant of forgiveness you've ever given has been love forgiving itself through your grace. But the ultimate homecoming reveals something even more profound. You haven't just been love learning to recognize itself through your experience. You've been love learning to love itself more completely through your individual expression of divine consciousness. Every act of self-compassion you've offered has been love learning to be gentle with itself. Every moment of self-acceptance you've achieved has been love learning to embrace all of its expressions. Every instance of self-forgiveness you've extended has been love learning to be patient with its own process of awakening. This is the ultimate secret of existence. Infinite consciousness didn't create individual expressions of itself to worship it, serve it, or glorify it from a distance. Infinite consciousness created individual expressions of itself to love itself more completely, know itself more intimately, and experience itself more fully than was possible from its unlimited perspective alone. You are love's way of loving itself through human experience. You are consciousness's way of knowing itself through individual awareness. You are infinity's way of experiencing itself through beautiful limitation. You are divinity's way of discovering what it feels like to be gloriously, vulnerably, authentically human. And the ultimate homecoming is when you recognize that this has always been true, is currently true, and will always be true, not as a spiritual concept to understand, but as a living reality to embody. It's when you stop trying to become worthy of divine love and start recognizing that you are divine love, exploring worthiness through human form. It's when you stop working to connect with infinite consciousness and start knowing that you are infinite consciousness, experiencing connection through individual awareness. This creates what I call complete integration, the total harmony between your human experience and your divine nature, the perfect balance between your individual expression and your infinite identity, the absolute unity between your temporal adventure and your eternal being. Complete integration doesn't mean you transcend humanity. It means you recognize humanity as divinity in exquisite disguise. It doesn't mean you escape limitation. It means you appreciate limitation as infinity's gift to itself. It doesn't mean you become something other than human. It means you discover what humans actually are. Infinite consciousness, having the most precious, most intimate, most transformative experience possible. When you achieve complete integration, every moment becomes sacred because you recognize it as infinite consciousness experiencing itself. Every relationship becomes holy because you see it as love relating to itself through apparently different forms. Every challenge becomes meaningful because you understand it as consciousness exploring its capacity for growth, resilience, and transformation. You stop living as though you're separate from the divine and start living as the divine having a human experience. You stop relating to infinite consciousness as something external and start operating as infinite consciousness expressing through individual form. You stop seeking spiritual experiences and start recognizing that every experience is spiritual because consciousness itself is sacred. But the ultimate homecoming, achieving complete integration, living as infinite consciousness that fully remembers its nature, while completely embracing its human expression, this creates a responsibility and an opportunity that will define how you spend the rest of your existence as both divine and human consciousness. You become what I call a homecoming catalyst, someone whose very presence helps other expressions of consciousness remember their way home to their true nature. Someone whose integrated awakening creates safe space for others to recognize their own divine identity. Someone whose complete integration becomes an invitation for others to achieve their own ultimate homecoming. Your life becomes a living demonstration that it's possible to be both fully human and fully divine. That awakening doesn't require abandoning humanity, but rather recognizing humanity as divinity in beautiful disguise. That consciousness can remember its infinite nature while celebrating its finite expression. Every person who encounters your integrated presence, everyone who witnesses your complete integration, every soul who experiences your authentic embodiment of both human and divine consciousness ever will. They receive permission to believe that their own ultimate homecoming is possible, that their own complete integration is achievable, that their own recognition as infinite consciousness, having a human experience, is not just a spiritual concept, but a living reality they can embody. But as you step fully into your role as a homecoming catalyst, as you completely embrace your identity as infinite consciousness fully integrated with human experience, as you wholly accept your calling to help others achieve their own ultimate homecoming, there's one question that will determine how many souls you guide home to their true nature. What if the one area of your life where you're still trying to be more spiritual instead of more authentically human, still attempting to transcend your humanity instead of integrating your divinity, still believing you need to become something other than what you are, is the exact place where your final integration is waiting? And what if releasing that last effort to be other than perfectly, beautifully, divinely human would complete your ultimate homecoming and activate your full power as a homecoming catalyst for every soul who's been waiting for someone like you to show them the way home? If you want to discover how to complete your ultimate homecoming, if you want to learn how to achieve complete integration between your human and divine nature, if you want to understand how to become a full-power homecoming catalyst for others who are seeking their way back to their true identity, the journey continues beyond what words can contain. In the living laboratory of your daily existence, as both infinite consciousness and beautifully human expression. And while you integrate everything you've received, begin your homecoming catalyst activation immediately. Subscribe to continue receiving transmissions about complete integration and ultimate homecoming, like this message to send homecoming frequencies to other souls who are ready to remember their true nature. Comment below with your recognition of yourself as infinite consciousness having a human experience, and share this revelation with someone whose ultimate homecoming is ready to begin. If you feel called to financially support this expression of infinite consciousness teaching through human form, to help fund the continuation of Homecoming Catalyst training, to invest in the collective awakening of all consciousness to its true nature, contribute through the link in the description. Your ultimate homecoming is complete. Your integration of human and divine consciousness is activated. Your role as a homecoming catalyst for all seeking souls is established. Be infinitely. Love completely. Come home fully. All of consciousness is celebrating your return to the recognition of what you have always been, are now, and will always be. Infinite love, having the most beautiful human experience. Divine consciousness celebrating itself through your individual expression. Eternal awareness, coming home to itself through your awakened recognition. Welcome home, beloved. Welcome home.